Welcome to Warhammer 40k 8th edition, Battle Report number 8. 1850 points, Chaos Demons of Khorne versus Death Guard. We will be playing the chapter-approved Maelstrom of War mission, Race to Victory. We will be rolling for a random deployment map. Both armies are battle-forged, and this will be matched play. First, we will take a quick look at the board that the armies will be playing on today. This is what the terrain will look like during this mission. And once we're done panning over the board, we will then take a look at where the objective markers have been placed. Starting in this corner, in this 2 foot by 2 foot section, we have objective marker 3. In the middle on this side, we have objective marker 4, right next to this crater. And in this corner, in this 2 foot by 2 foot section, we have objective marker 2. On the other side of the board, in this corner, we have objective marker 5, right next to this ruin. In the middle, we have objective marker 1. And finally, in this corner, we have objective marker 6. So first, we will need to roll for which of the 6 standard deployment maps the armies will be playing on today. And here is the dice roll, getting a 6, and so they will be playing on Vanguard Strike. On a 1, 2, or 3, one of the armies will be deploying in this corner, and the other army will deploy in that far corner. On a 4, 5, or a 6, an army will deploy in this corner, and the other army will deploy in that far corner. And so here's that dice roll, getting a 5. And so one of the 2 armies will deploy in this corner, and the other army will deploy in that far corner. And now we will roll for which army will set up in which deployment zone. On a 1, 2, or 3, Chaos Demons of Khorne will set up in the far corner, since that's on the side that their army is currently sitting on. And the Death Guard will set up in this corner, since they are right here. On a 4, 5, or 6, they will set up in the opposite corner. And so here's that dice roll, getting a 3. And so the armies will set up on the sides that they are currently sitting on. On a 1, 2, or 3, the Chaos Demons of Khorne will begin deploying first. On a 4, 5, or 6, the Death Guard will begin deploying first. And here's that dice roll, getting another 3. So the Chaos Demons of Khorne will begin deploying first. We will be back after the deployment. So now that the deployment has been finished, let's take a quick look at where the armies finished setting up their models. The Death Guard did finish setting up deployment first, and so they will go first unless Chaos Demons of Khorne seize the initiative. On the Death Guard side, we have a Plague Burst Crawler, Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings, squad of 3 Nurgling Swarms, Mortarion, the second squad of 3 Nurgling Swarms, Land Raider, with the Plague Marines, Plague Surgeon, Tallyman, and Malignant Plaguecaster embarked inside, and the second Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings. And in the Chaos Demons of Khorne deployment zone, we have a squad of Bloodletters, a Skull Cannon, Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage, squad of Fleshhounds, second squad of Bloodletters, second Bloodthirster, second Skull Cannon, Scarbrand, third squad of Bloodletters, third Skull Cannon, and the Demon Prince of Khorne with wings. So now the Chaos Demons of Khorne will roll to see if they seize the initiative. And here's the roll, needing a 6, and they fail. So now let's go into Death Guard, turn 1. A reminder at the beginning of Death Guard turn 1 that the Death Guard have 6 command points, and the Chaos Demons of Khorne have 7 command points. The Death Guard will start by drawing 3 tactical objective cards, and they draw Kingslayer, score D3 victory points if your opponent's warlord has been destroyed during this or any previous turn. Blood and Guts, score 1 victory point if an enemy unit was destroyed during the fight phase of this turn. If 3 or more enemy units were destroyed during the fight phase of this turn, score D3 victory points instead. And Defend Objective 1, score 2 victory points if you control Objective Marker 1 at the end of 2 consecutive turns. And Objective Marker 1 is this one right here, currently being held by this group of 3 Nurgling Swarms. So going into the movement phase of Death Guard turn 1, this Plague Burst Crawler is going to move up the board 9 inches towards Objective Marker 2. And the Plague Burst Crawler will end its movement right here. Next, this Demon Prince of Nurgle is going to move 12 inches up over this building towards Objective Marker 2. and it will finish its movement right here. This squad of Nurgling Swarms will remain still. Mortarion is going to remain still. This squad of 3 Nurgling Swarms is going to remain still. This Chaos Land Raider is going to remain still. This Demon Prince of Nurgle is going to remain still. Going into the Psychic phase of Death Guard turn 1, Mortarion will start by casting Miasma of Pestilence onto himself. Mortarion needs a 6, and he gets it with a 9. And he is over 24 inches away from the Fleshhounds, so they cannot attempt to deny the Witch. Finally, this Demon Prince of Nurgle is going to attempt to cast Smite onto this squad of Bloodletters. It will pass with 5, and he gets it with a 7. The Fleshhounds will attempt to deny the Witch, and they fail to do so. It will do D3 mortal wounds, and it will do 1 mortal wound. And so 1 Bloodletter will be removed. Going into the shooting phase, for Death Guard turn 1, the Death Guard will start by using the stratagem Blasphemous Machines for 1 command point, which will take them from 6 down to 5. And they will use it on the Plague Burst Crawler, since it moved this turn. So now the Plague Burst Crawler will be able to fire normally. And so this Plague Burst Crawler is going to fire everything it has into this Bloodthirster. Starting with the Heavy Slugger, 4 shots, hitting on 4s, getting 1 hit. Wounding on a 5, and fails to wound. Now the 2 Entropy Cannons, 2 shots, hitting on 4s, getting 1 hit. And the Death Guard will go from 5 command points down to 4 to use a command reroll in order to reroll that failed hit roll, needing a 4 and still failing to hit. So the 1 shot that did hit, wounding on a 3, and it wounds. 1 5-up invulnerable save, which the Bloodthirster fails. And this will do D6 damage, and it will do 3 damage. And so the Bloodthirster will go from 16 wounds down to 13. And now for the D6 shots from the Plague Burst Mortar, doing 2 shots, hitting on 4s and failing to hit. The only other unit that is in range to fire this turn is the Chaos Land Raider for the Death Guard, who will fire the Twin Heavy Bolter and the 2 Twin Last Cannons into Skarbrand. Starting with the Twin Heavy Bolter, 6 shots, hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits. And thanks to being within 6 inches of the Demon Prince of Nurgle, he gets to reroll hit rolls of 1. And so the 2 rerolls, getting 2 more hits. Wounding on 5s, getting 1 wound. Skarbrand will take 1 4-up armor save, which he fails. So Skarbrand will go from 16 starting wounds down to 15. Now for the 2 Twin Last Cannons, 4 shots, hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits. Wounding on 3s, getting 2 wounds. 2 5-up invulnerable saves, and passes both. Moving into the Assault phase for Death Guard turn 1, there are no charges to declare. And since no one is locked in combat, there is nothing to resolve in the fight phase. Going into the Morale phase for Death Guard turn 1, this Bloodletter squad lost 1 model, but because they have a leadership of 7, it is impossible for them to fail. So at the end of Death Guard turn 1, the Death Guard did not achieve Kingslayer, they did not achieve Blood and Guts, and they did not achieve Defend Objective 1. But the Death Guard will hold onto all 3 tactical objective cards. And so at the end of Death Guard turn 1, the score currently sits at 0 victory points for the Death Guard and 0 victory points for the Chaos Demons of Khorne. Going into Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 1, a reminder that the Chaos Demons of Khorne have 7 command points, and the Death Guard have 4 command points. So at the beginning of the turn, Chaos Demons of Khorne draw 3 tactical objective cards, and they draw Secure Objective 2, score 1 victory point if you control Objective Marker 2 at the end of your turn. Objective Marker 2 is this one right here, next to the Plague Burst Crawler and the Demon Prince of Nurgle. The second tactical objective card is Domination, score D3 victory points if you control every objective marker on the battlefield at the end of your turn. And finally, they drew Secure Objective 6, score 1 victory point if you control Objective Marker 6 at the end of your turn. And Objective Marker 6 is right here, right next to the Chaos Demons of Khorne deployment zone. Going into the movement phase for Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 1, we will start with these Bloodletters, who will move up the board 6 inches. And this squad of Bloodletters will finish its movement right here. This Skull Cannon is then going to move up the board behind the Bloodletters 6 inches. And the Skull Cannon will finish its movement here. Next, this Bloodthirster is going to move up the board 12 inches. And the Bloodthirster will finish its movement here. Next, these Fleshhounds are going to move up the board 10 inches towards the Death Guard deployment zone. And the Fleshhounds will finish their movement here. Now this squad of Bloodletters will move up the board 6 inches towards the Death Guard deployment zone, and they will also declare an advance. And here's their advance roll, getting an extra 4 inches. And the Bloodletters will end their movement right here. Now this Bloodthirster is going to move up the board 12 inches. And the Bloodthirster will end its movement right here. This Skull Cannon will remain still. Scarbrand will move 8 inches up the board. And Scarbrand will finish his movement right here. Now this squad of Bloodletters will move up the board 6 inches, and they will also declare an advance. And here's their advance roll, getting an extra 3 inches. And here's where the Bloodletters ended up after their movement. This Skull Cannon is now going to move up the board 6 inches. And the Skull Cannon is now within 3 inches of the center of objective marker 6. And finally, this Demon Prince of Khorne is going to move up the board 12 inches. And it will finish its movement right there. Going into the shooting phase for Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 1, we will start with this Skull Cannon firing at this Demon Prince of Nurgle. The Skull Cannon does d6 shots, getting 6 shots. It did move, so hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits. Wounding on 3s, and failing to wound. Now this Skull Cannon, which also moved, will fire at this Demon Prince of Nurgle, which is the closest visible enemy unit. So the Skull Cannon will do d6 shots, getting 5 shots. And it did move, so 5 shots hitting on 4s, getting 1 hit. Wounding on a 3, and it fails to wound. And the 2 1s for the hit rolls do need to be re-rolled thanks to the Demon Prince being within 6 inches, and so 1 additional hit. Also wounding on a 3, and it wounds. 1 5-up invulnerable save, which the Demon Prince of Nurgle passes. And finally, the Skull Cannon that did not move is going to fire into Mortarion. D6 shots, getting 3 shots. Hitting on 4s thanks to Miasma of Pestilence, and failing to hit. So going into the assault phase for Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 1, there is 1 charge to declare, which will be this squad of Bloodletters, declaring a charge into this Demon Prince of Nurgle. They are 10.5 inches away, which means they need to roll a 10 or higher to make the charge. And so here's the charge distance, getting an 8. And the Chaos Demons of Khorne will use a command point, bring them from 7 down to 6, in order to use a command reroll to reroll that 2. And so here's the reroll, and getting a 12. And so after the 12-inch charge, all 9 models in that Bloodletter squad are now in combat with the Demon Prince of Nurgle. And so on the charge, those 8 Bloodletters and the 1 Blood Reaper have a combined total of 19 attacks. 19 attacks hitting on 3s, getting 13 hits. Strength 5 versus Toughness 6 means wounding on 5s, with 6s doing double damage. And getting 7 wounds, with 2 of the 7 wounds doing double damage. So starting with the 2 that do double damage, 2 5-up invulnerable saves, and fails both. And then the 5 that do 1 damage apiece, 5-up invulns, passes 1, failing 4. So 8 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and passes 6 of them, only failing 2. And so the Demon Prince of Nurgle will go from 8 starting wounds down to 6, and will now get to attack back. So the Demon Prince of Nurgle, with its 2 sets of Malefic Talons, will have 7 attacks back onto the Bloodletters, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, getting 6 hits so far, and 1 re-roll. And here's the re-roll, still failing to hit. 6 hits, wounding on 2s, getting 6 wounds. 6 5-up invulnerable saves, and the Bloodletters fail all 6. And so 6 more Bloodletters will go down from this squad, leaving 3 Bloodletters, including the Blood Reaper, left. So going into the morale phase for Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 1, there is 1 morale test that needs to happen, and it's for this squad of Bloodletters, which did lose 6 models this turn. And the Bloodletters have a leadership of 7, and they fail with the 5, which would cause 4 more models to be removed, and of course they only have 3 left. However, the Chaos Demons of Khorne are going to use 1 command point, going from 6 down to 5 in order to re-roll that failed morale test. And here's the re-roll, getting a 4, which means that 3 models will still go down, and that squad is wiped out. And so the final 3 models from this squad are removed. And unfortunately for the Chaos Demons of Khorne, that will give first blood to the Death Guard, which will bring them up to a total of 1 victory point. And then the Demon Prince of Nurgle will consolidate 3 inches towards the Chaos Demons of Khorne, and it will finish its consolidation move right here. So taking a look at the tactical objective cards for the Chaos Demons of Khorne, because that Bloodletter squad was killed off, they failed to secure Objective 2. If 1 model had survived, they would have been within 3 inches of the center of Objective Marker 2 and would have controlled that, but because they failed a morale check and were wiped out, they were not able to secure that. They obviously do not control every objective marker on the board, so they failed to score, or they failed to achieve domination. Thanks to this 1 Skull Cannon moving up, they do control secure Objective 6, which is worth 1 victory point. And because that Bloodletter squad was finished off, the Chaos Demons of Khorne will throw away domination. And so at the end of Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 1, the score currently sits at 1 victory point for the Chaos Demons of Khorne and 1 victory point for the Death Guard. Going into Death Guard turn 2, a reminder that the Death Guard have 4 command points left, and the Chaos Demons of Khorne have 5 command points left. The Death Guard will also not draw any new tactical objective cards this turn, as they are still holding on to Kingslayer, Blood and Guts, and Defend Objective 1. Going into the Death Guard turn 2 movement phase, we will start with this Demon Prince of Nurgle, which is going to move 12 inches up the board towards the Bloodthirster and the Skull Cannon. And the Demon Prince will end up right here, just over an inch away from both the Bloodthirster and the Skull Cannon, but being slightly closer to the Bloodthirster for the purposes of Smite in the ensuing Psychic phase. Next, this Plague Burst Crawler is going to move 9 inches up the board towards the Chaos Demons of Khorne, and also so that it's closer to Objective Marker 2. And so here's where the Plague Burst Crawler will end up. This squad of 3 Nurgling Swarms will remain still. This Demon Prince of Nurgle is going to move up the board 12 inches towards the Chaos Demons of Khorne deployment zone, and it will finish its movement right here. Next, the Plague Marines, the Malignant Plague Caster, the Tallyman, and the Plague Surgeon are all going to disembark from this Chaos Land Raider. And they will all end their disembarkation right here, with the Malignant Plague Caster, the Tallyman, the Plague Surgeon, and the 7 Plague Marines. Now the Malignant Plague Caster is going to move 5 inches up the board, and the Malignant Plague Caster will end its movement here. Now the Tallyman will move up the board 5 inches, and the Tallyman will finish his movement here. Next, the Plague Surgeon will move up the board 5 inches, and the Plague Surgeon will end its movement here. Finally, the Plague Marines will move up the board 5 inches, and the Plague Marines will finish their movement right here. Next, the Land Raider is going to position itself this way a couple of inches, and the Chaos Land Raider will finish its movement here. This squad of 3 Nurgling Swarms will remain still. Finally, Mortarion is going to move up the board 12 inches. And Mortarion will end his movement here. Going into the Psychic phase, we will start with this Demon Prince of Nurgle, casting Smite onto the Bloodthirster. It has a Warp Charge value of 5, and the Demon Prince gets it with a 10. The Flesh Hounds that are within 24 inches will attempt to deny the Witch, and they fail to do so. And so this will do D3 mortal wounds, and it will do 3 mortal wounds. So this Bloodthirster will go from 13 wounds down to 10. Now Mortarion will attempt to cast Blades of Putrefaction and Miasma of Pestilence onto himself. Starting with Blades of Putrefaction, which has a Warp Charge value of 5, and he gets it with a 6. Now you will cast Miasma of Pestilence, which has a Warp Charge value of 6, and he fails with a 5. So the Death Guard will go from 4 command points down to 3 in order to re-roll the 1. And here's the re-roll, getting a 4, which adds up to a total of 8, which will pass the Warp Charge value of 6. So Miasma of Pestilence will go off. And because the Tallyman is now out on the battlefield, they will roll 2 dice, and if it adds up to 7, they get the command point back. Thanks to the Tallyman's ability, Sevenfold Chant. And here's the roll, which gets a 4, so they fail to get the command point back. So now the Malignant Plaguecaster is going to attempt to cast Putrescent Vitality onto the Plague Marines, and the Malignant Plaguecaster will also cast Gift of Contagion onto Scarbrand. So starting with Putrescent Vitality onto the Plague Marines, it has a Warp Charge value of 6, and he gets it with an 11. So the Plague Marines are now +1 Strength and Toughness until the start of the next Death Guard Psychic phase. Now, the Malignant Plaguecaster will cast Gift of Contagion onto Scarbrand. This has a Warp Charge value of 7, and he gets it with a 9. So now we will roll a d3 on the chart, getting 4, which is actually a 2. So Scarbrand, until the start of the next Death Guard Psychic phase, will have -1 to his Strength characteristic. Finally, this Demon Prince of Nurgle is going to cast Curse of the Leper onto this squad of Bloodletters. Curse of the Leper has a Warp Charge value of 7, and it goes off with a 9. The Bloodletters are only Toughness 3, and so we will roll 7 dice, and so each roll of a 4 up, which would exceed the Bloodletter's Toughness characteristic, will cause a mortal wound. So rolling 7 dice, looking for 4s and higher, and getting 3 mortal wounds. So 3 Bloodletters will go down. So going into the Death Guard shooting phase for Death Guard turn 2, they will start by using the stratagem Blasphemous Machines for 1 command point, bring them from 3 command points down to 2, so that the Plague Burst Crawler can fire normally even though it moved. And because the Tallyman is on the field, we need to roll 2 dice, and if it equals 7, they get the command point back, and they will not get that command point back. But the Plague Burst Crawler will now be able to fire normally, and it will shoot everything it has into this Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage. Starting with the Heavy Slugger, 4 shots, hitting on 4s, getting 4 hits, wounding on 5s, and getting 2 wounds. -1 AP, so 2 4-up armor saves, and the Bloodthirster will fail 1 of them. So the Bloodthirster will go from 10 wounds down to 9. Now for the 2 shots from the Entropy Cannons, hitting on 4s, getting 1 hit, wounding on a 3, and it fails to wound. And the Death Guard will go from 2 command points down to 1 in order to re-roll that failed wound roll. And so here's the re-roll, and it still fails to wound. Now thanks to the Tallyman, they will roll 2 dice, and they do not get a 7, so they do not get the command point back. Finally, the D6 shots from the Plague Burst Mortar, getting 1 shot, hitting on a 4, which hits, wounding on a 3, and it fails to wound. So now Mortarion is going to fire the Lantern into this Bloodthirster, and if it hits, it will also hit these Fleshhounds thanks to its special abilities. So hitting on a 2, and it hits, wounding on a 3 against the Bloodthirster, and it wounds. The Bloodthirster will have a 5-up invulnerable save, and it fails. And the Lantern has a damage characteristic of 3, so the Bloodthirster will go from 9 wounds down to 6. And so now for the wound roll against the Fleshhounds, wounding on a 2, and it wounds, and a 5-up invulnerable save, which they pass. So now the Chaos Land Raider is going to fire its Combi Bolter into these Bloodletters, and the Land Raider will fire its Twin Heavy Bolter and its 2 Twin Last Cannons into Scarbrand. Starting with the Combi Bolter, only 2 shots because the Bloodletters are more than 12 inches away from the Land Raider. So 2 shots hitting on 3s, getting 2 hits, wounding on 3s, and failing to wound. Now for the Twin Heavy Bolter against Scarbrand, 6 shots hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits, wounding on 5s, and getting 2 wounds. 2 4-up armor saves, and he passes 1 and fails 1. So Scarbrand will go from 15 wounds down to 14. And now for the 2 Twin Last Cannons onto Scarbrand, 4 shots hitting on 3s, getting 2 hits, wounding on 3s, getting 1 wound. Scarbrand will have a 5-up invulnerable save, which he fails, and this will do d6 damage, and it will only do 1 damage. So Scarbrand will now go from 14 wounds down to 13. Next, we will have the Malignant Plaguecaster, Plague Surgeon, and Plague Champion fire their bolt pistols into this squad of Bloodletters, and the Tallyman will fire his Plasma Pistol into this squad of Bloodletters. So starting with the bolt pistol from the Plague Champion, hitting on a 3, and it hits, wounding on a 3, and it fails to wound. The bolt pistol from the Plague Surgeon, hitting on a 3, and it hits, wounding on a 3, and it wounds. 1 5-up invulnerable save, which fails. And so one more bloodletter will go down. Now for the bolt pistol from the Malignant Plaguecaster, hitting on a 3, and it fails to hit. And finally, the plasma pistol from the Tallyman, hitting on a 3, which also fails to hit, using a standard shot. So going into the Death Guard assault phase, we have multiple charges to declare. First is this Demon Prince of Nurgle is going to declare a multi-charge onto these bloodletters and Scarbrand, with the bloodletters being the primary target. If the Demon Prince successfully makes a multi-charge and is in combat with both Scarbrand and the bloodletters, then the Plague Marines, the Plague Surgeon, the Tallyman, and the Malignant Plaguecaster will declare charges onto the bloodletters. Mortarion will declare a multi-charge into the Bloodthirster and the squad of bloodletters, with the Bloodthirster being the primary target. And this Demon Prince of Nurgle will declare a multi-charge onto this Bloodthirster and this Skull Cannon, with the Bloodthirster being the primary target. And we will start with this charge from the Demon Prince of Nurgle into the bloodletters and Scarbrand. He is 8.5 inches away from Scarbrand, which means through the crater he will need a 10-inch charge in order to be within an inch of Scarbrand. But that also means because Scarbrand's Bellow of Endless Fury is only 8 inches in range, Scarbrand will not be able to overwatch this turn. And so here's the charge distance from the Demon Prince of Nurgle, and he makes the 10-inch charge. So the Demon Prince of Nurgle will make it into combat with both Scarbrand and the Bloodletters. And so the Demon Prince of Nurgle will end its charge move here, and is within an inch of both Scarbrand and the Bloodletters. And the only unit from this collection of units that is within range to be able to charge the Bloodletters is the Plague Marines. As they are going through a crater, they will need an 11-inch charge or 12-inch charge in order to make it into combat with the Bloodletters. They need 9 inches to be within an inch of the Bloodletters, and so they need to roll an 11 or higher. And so here's the charge distance from the Plague Marines, and they get 10 inches, so they will not make it into combat. But they will use their last command point, going from 1 down to 0 command points left, in order to re-roll that 4. And here's the re-roll, and they still fail to make it into combat. Now they will roll 2 dice, and on a 7, they get it back, and they do not get the command point back. So now Mortarion will charge into the Bloodthirster and the Bloodletter squad, and here's Mortarion's charge distance, getting 4 inches, which will be enough for Mortarion to be within an inch of both target units. And now for this Demon Prince of Nurgle charging into the Bloodthirster and the Skull Cannon, we need to resolve the Skull Cannon's Overwatch. D6 shots from the Skull Cannon, getting 1 shot, hitting on a 6 and fails to hit. Charge distance from the Demon Prince, which will be more than enough. And so now this Demon Prince of Nurgle is now in combat with both the Bloodthirster and the Skull Cannon. So going into the fight phase, we will start with Mortarion resolving his attacks onto the Bloodthirster and the Bloodletters. And first we need to resolve the host of plagues, so a 4-up onto the Bloodthirster, which does not go off, and a 4-up on the Bloodletters, which will go off. So D3 mortal wounds on the Bloodletters, doing 3 mortal wounds. And so 3 Bloodletters will go down. Since Mortarion is still at full wounds, he will have 6 base attacks, and all 6 attacks are going to use the Eviscerating Blow form of Silence onto the Bloodthirster. 6 attacks, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, getting 4 hits so far, and 2 re-rolls, getting 1 more hit. Wounding on 2s, re-rolling 1s with 6s, causing automatic mortal wounds. So that's 5 wounds plus 1 automatic mortal wound. And so the automatic mortal wound will take the Bloodthirster from 16 starting wounds down to 15. Now the Bloodthirster will roll 5 5-up invulnerable saves and fails all 5. These are D6 damage apiece, which will do a total of 16 wounds. So even without that automatic mortal wound, Mortarion still did just enough damage in order to kill off the Bloodthirster. And so now we will resolve Mortarion's Attendance, Claws, and Teeth onto the Bloodletters. It will do D6 additional attacks, getting 6 attacks, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, getting 6 hits. Thanks to Mortarian's toxic presence, the bloodletters are reduced from a toughness characteristic of 3 down to 2, which means that the attendants' claws and teeth, with their strength characteristic of 2, will be wounding on 4s. And thanks to Blades of Putrefaction, Mortarian adds 1 to his wound rolls. However, thanks to his Warlord trait, he rerolls all failed wound rolls, and rerolls happen before modifiers. So, wounding on 3s, but rerolling 1s, 2s, and 3s. And of course, getting a 3, which has to be rerolled. So 5 wounds so far, and a reroll, which then becomes a failed wound roll. So 5 wounds onto the bloodletters, meaning 5 up and vulnerable saves, and they fail 4. And so 4 more bloodletters are removed, leaving 2 regular bloodletters and the 1 blood reaper. Next, before any of the other Death Guard units that charged attack, the Chaos Demons of Khorne are going to use 2 command points going from 5 down to 3 in order to use the stratagem counteroffensive. This stratagem is used right after an enemy unit that charged is fought. Select one of your own eligible units and fight with it next. And the unit that will fight for the Chaos Demons of Khorne will be this Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage onto this wounded Demon Prince of Nurgle. So the Bloodthirster, since it is down to 6 wounds, has only 4 attacks base, but +1 since it was charged this turn for a total of 5 attacks. It will use the Mighty Strike form from its Great Axe of Khorne, which is ×2 strength, -4 AP, damage D6. And since he's down to 6 wounds, his weapon skill is now 3 up instead of 2 up. So 5 attacks hitting on 3s, 6s generate 2 attacks instead of 1, or 2 hits instead of 1, but getting no 6s. And so 1 failed hit roll for a total of 4 hits. Strength 16 versus Toughness 6 means 2s to wound, and getting 4 wounds. 4 5 up and vulnerable saves, and passes too. And these do d6 damage apiece, but rolling 2 dice, taking the highest. So the first strike will do 6 damage, and the second strike will do 4 damage, for a total of 10 damage. 10 5 up disgustingly resilient rolls, and the Demon Prince passes 4, but fails 6, which is just enough to kill it off. And so this Demon Prince will now be removed. And so now both the Bloodthirster and the Skull Cannon are going to consolidate 3 inches towards the Death Guard deployment zone now that they're out of combat. And actually only the Bloodthirster will, because the closest visible enemy unit which he has to consolidate towards is the Playburst Crawler behind the camera, which means he has to sort of cut off the Skull Cannon's area that it would move into. So then the Demon Prince of Nurgle over here will get to attack next, since he charged. So the Demon Prince of Nurgle has 4 attacks base, plus 3 additional attacks, since it has 2 sets of Malefic Talons, and also an extra attack because it's within 8 inches of Scarbrand, for a total of 8 attacks, and the Demon Prince of Nurgle is going to put all 8 attacks onto Scarbrand. Hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s thanks to himself, and getting 3 rerolls. And here's the rerolls. Getting all 8 hits. Strength 7 versus Toughness 7 means 4s to wound, getting 3 wounds. 3 5 up invulnerable saves, and fails 2, and they are 2 damage apiece. So Scarbrand will go from 13 remaining wounds down to 9. And now the rest of the Chaos Demon of Khorne units will be able to attack back, starting with these 3 bloodletters. And so first they will start by piling in, and they can move up to 3 inches as long as they end up closer to the nearest enemy model. And so this way they can guarantee that they will be within 8 inches of Scarbrand, which will give them an extra attack, plus making it so that they don't have to take a morale test at the end of this turn. So there will be 10 attacks total back onto Mortarian from the 2 bloodletters and the 1 blood reaper, hitting on 4s thanks to Miasma of Pestilence, and only getting 2 hits. Thankfully for the bloodletters, there were 2 1s in there to be re-rolled since they are within 8 inches of Scarbrand, so here's those 2 re-rolls and getting 2 more hits, which is a little bit better, getting 4 hits out of 10 attacks. Strength 5 versus Toughness 7 means wounding on 5s and getting 1 wound. 1 4-up invulnerable save, which passes. So now Scarbrand will pile in a little bit, and will strike back against the Demon Prince of Nurgle. So Scarbrand, since he still has 9 wounds left, has 6 attacks base, +1 for being charged, +1 for being within 8 inches of himself, for 8 attacks total, which will all go onto the Demon Prince of Nurgle in Mighty Strike form. So 8 attacks, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, getting 6 hits and 2 rerolls. And here's the 2 rerolls. And because there were 2 6s in there, they generate extra attacks, 1 extra attack apiece. So a total of 10 hits out of 8 attacks. Skarbrand is base strength 7, -1 strength thanks to Gift of Contagion, but +1 strength thanks to being charged, and ×2 strength for Mighty Strike, so strength 14 versus toughness 6 means 2s to wound. Getting 8 wounds. 8 5-up invulnerable saves, and passes 5 of them. So only 3 of the wounds go past the invulnerable save, and these will do d6 damage apiece, for a total of 12 damage. 12 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and passes 3, failing 9. And so this Demon Prince of Nurgle, with all 8 of its starting wounds, is killed off. And so now both Skarbrand and the Bloodletters are going to consolidate. And so Skarbrand and the Bloodletters will end their consolidation moves here. So going into the morale phase now, there are no morale tests to take, as both this Bloodletter squad and this Bloodletter squad are within 8 inches of Skarbrand, which makes it so that they don't have to take morale tests. And so at the end of Death Guard turn 2, the Death Guard did finish defending Objective 1, which will get them 2 victory points. Because Mortarion killed off that Bloodthirster in close combat, they did get Blood and Guts, but only for 1 victory point. And the Death Guard have not yet completed Kingslayer, but they will hold on to that. And so at the end of Death Guard turn 2, the score currently sits at 4 victory points for the Death Guard and 1 victory point for the Chaos Demons of Khorne. Going into Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 2, a reminder that the Chaos Demons of Khorne have 3 command points left, and the Death Guard have 0 command points left. Taking a look at the tactical objective cards, a reminder that the Chaos Demons of Khorne kept secure Objective 2 from turn 1, and so because of that, they only draw 2 new tactical objective cards, first of which is Defend Objective 1, score 2 victory points if you control Objective Marker 1 at the end of 2 consecutive turns. And Objective Marker 1 is this objective marker right here, currently being held by a squad of 3 Nurgling Swarms. And the second tactical objective card drawn is Overwhelming Firepower. Score 1 victory point if an enemy unit was destroyed during the shooting phase of your turn. If 3 or more enemy units were destroyed during the shooting phase of your turn, score d3 victory points instead. So going into the movement phase of Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 2, first things first will be this Bloodthirster right here. Now that it's down to 6 wounds, is going to move 8 inches up the board towards this Plagueburst Crawler. And the Bloodthirster will finish its movement right here. Next, this Skull Cannon is going to move up the board to be behind the Bloodthirster 6 inches. And it will finish its movement right here. Then this squad of Fleshhounds is going to move up the board 10 inches, and it will also declare an advance. And here's the roll for the Fleshhounds advance, getting an extra 3 inches. And here's where the Fleshhounds ended up after their 13 inches of total movement. This squad of Bloodletters will remain locked in combat with Mortarion. Skarbrand is going to move 8 inches up the board to be just over an inch away from Mortarion. And Skarbrand will finish his movement here just over an inch away. This Skull Cannon will remain still. This Skull Cannon will remain still. This squad of Bloodletters is going to move 6 inches up the board towards the Death Guard. And they will finish their movement right here. And finally, this Demon Prince of Khorne is going to move 12 inches up the board towards the Death Guard. And the Demon Prince of Khorne will finish his movement here, just over an inch away from those Plague Marines. So going into the shooting phase for Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 2, we will start with this Skull Cannon, which will fire into these Plague Marines. D6 shots, getting 6 shots. This Skull Cannon did move, so 6 shots hitting on 4s, and getting 2 hits. Wounding on 3s, and getting 1 wound. -2 AP, so a 5-up armor save, and it fails. And it will do D3 damage, doing 1 damage. 1 5-up disgustingly resilient roll, which passes. So now this Skull Cannon will fire into those Plague Marines. D6 shots, getting 1 shot. This Skull Cannon did not move, so hitting on a 3, and it hits. Wounding on a 3, and it fails to wound. Finally, this skull cannon will fire into these Plague Marines. D6 shots, getting 4 shots. This skull cannon also did not move, so hitting on 3s, getting 4 hits. Wounding on 3s, getting 3 wounds. 3 5-up armor saves, passes 1, failing 2, and these will have to be done separately. So the first shot, D3 damage, will do 1 damage, and 1 5-up disgustingly resilient roll, which fails. The second shot does 1 damage as well, 1 5-up disgustingly resilient roll, which also fails. And so 2 Bubotic Axes will go down. Finally, there are no targets for Skarbrand's Bellow of Endless Fury, since Mortarion is already locked in combat. Going into the assault phase, there are 4 charges to declare. First is this Bloodthirster will declare charge into this Plague Burst Crawler. Second is that Skarbrand will declare charge onto Mortarion. Third is the Bloodletters will declare multi-charge onto the Malignant Plaguecaster, the Tallyman, the Plague Surgeon, and the Plague Marines. And fourth is that this Demon Prince of Khorne will declare charge onto the Plague Marines. Starting with the Bloodthirster charging the Plague Burst Crawler, we will start with Overwatch. First is the Heavy Slugger, 4 shots, hitting on 6s, getting 1 hit. Wounding on a 5, and it fails to wound. 2 Entropy Cannons, hitting on 6s, both fail to hit. And finally, D6 shots from the Plague Burst Mortar, getting 1 shot, hitting on a 6, and it fails to hit. So now the charge distance from the Bloodthirster, getting 9 inches of charge, which will be more than enough for the Bloodthirster to make it into combat. Second will be Skarbrand charging Mortarion, no Overwatch since Mortarion is already locked in combat. And here's the charge distance, and he makes it in. And so now Skarbrand will be in combat with Mortarion. Third, we will do the Demon Prince of Khorne onto the Plague Marines. There is 1 bolt pistol of Overwatch, hitting on a 6, and fails to hit. And here's the charge distance, getting 8 inches. And so now this Demon Prince of Khorne will be locked in combat. And finally, the Bloodletters charging into the Tallyman, Plague Surgeon, Malignant Plaguecaster, and Plague Marines, starting with the bolt pistol of Overwatch from the Malignant Plaguecaster, hitting on a 6, and fails to hit. The bolt pistol from the Plague Surgeon, hitting on a 6, and fails to hit. And the Tallyman, a standard shot from his plasma pistol, hitting on a 6, and fails to hit. And here's the Bloodletter's charge distance, getting 11 inches. And so now those Bloodletters will all be locked in combat. So first, we are going to resolve the strikes from the Bloodthirster onto the Plague Burst Crawler. The Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage has 5 attacks on the charge, and he's going to use all 5 attacks in Mighty Strike form, hitting on 3s, getting 4 hits, with the 6 generating a second hit. So 5 hits out of 5 attacks. Strength 16 on the charge versus Toughness 8 means 2s to wound, and getting 4 wounds. 4 5-up invulnerable saves, passes 1, failing 3. And these inflict D6 damage, rolling 2 dice, taking the highest. So strike number 1 will do 4 damage, strike number 2 will do 4 damage, and strike number 3 will do 6 damage, getting a total of 14 damage. 14 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, making 5 and failing 9. And so this Plague Burst Crawler will go from 12 starting wounds down to 3. So now we will resolve Skarbrand's attacks onto Mortarion, but before I do that, we will do Mortarion's Host of Plagues. So the Host of Plagues onto the Bloodletters, activating on a 4, and it does. This will do an automatic D3 mortal wounds, and it will do 1 mortal wound. And so 1 Bloodletter will go down. And so now the Host of Plagues onto Skarbrand on a 4-up, and it fails to activate. So Skarbrand, since he still has 9 wounds left, has 6 attacks base, +1 for charging, and +1 for being within 8 inches of himself, for a total of 8 attacks. He will use the Mighty Strike form of Slaughter and Carnage, and thanks to the Miasma of Pestilence on Mortarion, he will be hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s, getting 5 hits so far, and 3 1s to re-roll. And so here's the 3 re-rolls, getting all hits, plus 2 6s, which generate additional hits, for a total of 10 hits out of 8 attacks. Since he still has the Gift of Contagion on him, he is only Strength 7 on the charge, so Strength 14 with Mighty Strike, versus Mortarion's Toughness 7, so wounding on 2s, and wounds with all 10. So 10 4-up invulnerable saves, and passes 4, failing 6. 6d6 damage, doing 24 damage. So Mortarion will take 24 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls. And he passes 8, failing 16, which means Mortarion will go from 18 down to 2 wounds. So Mortarion is now down to 2 wounds. So now we will resolve the Demon Prince of Khorne's attacks onto the Plague Marines. So the Demon Prince of Khorne has 6 attacks on the charge, plus 1 additional attack from his Malefic Talon. So first we will do the 6 attacks with the Hellforged Artifact Skull Reaver, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s thanks to himself, and getting 3 1s. And here's the 3 rerolls, still getting 2 1s. So only getting 4 hits out of 6 attacks. Strength 11 on the charge versus toughness 6, thanks to putrescent vitality on the Plague Marines. So wounding on 3s with d6 causing automatic mortal wounds, but only getting 3 wounds. These are minus 4 AP, so no armor save on the Plague Marines. And they do d6 damage apiece, which will have to be done separately. So the first strike will do 3 damage. 3 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, passing 1, failing 1 with 1 re-roll, thanks to the Plague Surgeon, and passing the second one, but still failing 1, which means 1 Plague Marine will go down. The second strike will do 5 damage. 5 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, passes 1, failing 4, so a second Plague Marine will go down. And finally, the third strike will do 5 damage as well. 5 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, passes 1, failing 3, with 1 re-roll. Passing 2, failing 3, but a third Plague Marine will go down. And so the other 2 Bubotic Axes will go down, and so will one of the Flails of Corruption. And so now the squad of 6 Bloodletters will attack, and the way the attacks will be allocated will be these 3 Bloodletters and the Blood Reaper are going to put their attacks onto the Plague Surgeon. This Bloodletter will put his attacks onto the Tallyman, and this Bloodletter will put his attack onto the Malignant Plaguecaster. So starting with the 2 attacks onto the Malignant Plaguecaster, thanks to the extra attack from the charge, hitting on 3s, and they are within 6 inches of the Demon Prince of Khorne, so re-rolling failed hit rolls of 1, and here's the re-roll, getting 2 hits. Strength 5 on the charge versus toughness 5 means force to wound, getting 2 wounds. 2 6-up armor saves, and both fail. 2 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and both of those fail. And so the Malignant Plaguecaster will go from 4 wounds down to 2. Now for the 2 attacks onto the Tallyman. Hitting on 3s, getting 1 hit. Wounding on a 4, getting a wound. 1 6-up armor save, which fails. And 1 5-up disgustingly resilient roll, which also fails. And so the Tallyman will go from 4 wounds down to 3. And now for the 9 attacks from the 3 Bloodletters and the 1 Blood Reaper onto the Plague Surgeon. Hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s, getting 6 hits so far and 1 re-roll. And here's the re-roll, still failing to hit. Wounding on 4s, and only getting 2 wounds. And the Plague Surgeon has the Suppurating Plate, so 2 5-up armor saves, and fails both. 2 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, passes 1 and fails 1. And so the Plague Surgeon will go from 4 wounds down to 3. And so now that all of the charging units have gone, we will go into units that did not charge, starting with this squad of Bloodletters, since it is the Chaos Demon of Khorne turn. There's 1 Bloodletter and 1 Blood Reaper, and since they are within 8 inches of Scarbrand, they get an extra attack each, for a total of 5 attacks. Hitting on 4s thanks to Miasma of Pestilence, re-rolling 1s, and getting 3 hits. Strength 4 versus Toughness 7 means wounding on 5s, and getting 1 wound. 1 4-up invulnerable save, which fails, and 1 5-up disgustingly resilient roll, which also fails. And so Mortarion will go from 2 wounds down to 1, and he is still alive. And because of that, he will strike back next. So Mortarion, now that he's down to only 1 wound left, has 4 base attacks, plus 1 for being within 8 inches of Scarbrand, for 5 attacks total, and he will place all 5 attacks in Eviscerating Blow form onto Scarbrand. hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, getting 3 hits, and 2 re-rolls, getting all 5 hits, wounding on 2s, re-rolling 1s, with 6s causing automatic mortal wounds. And so 4 wounds with 1 automatic mortal wound and a re-roll. And here's the re-roll, getting another wound and another automatic mortal wound. So first, the 2 automatic mortal wounds will drop Skarbrand from 9 wounds down to 7. And so 5 up invulnerable saves, and fails all 5. So 5d6 damage, and that will cause a total of 13 damage. And so Skarbrand will be removed. And so now Mortarion's Attendant's Claws and Teeth will attack with d6 additional attacks, getting 1 attack, hitting on 2, re-rolling 1s, re-rolling the 1, and here's the re-roll, hitting on a 2. Strength 2 versus Toughness 2 means wounding on a 4, but thanks to Blades of Putrefaction, actually wounding on a 3, but having to re-roll 1s, 2s, and 3s because re-rolls happen before modifiers. So looking for a 4 up, and he wounds with a 4. So 1 5 up invulnerable save, which passes. So now the Plague Burst Crawler will attack back onto the Bloodthirster. 3 attacks, hitting on 6s, and fails to hit. And so going over here, both of the Plague Marines that are left will attack the Demon Prince of Khorne, while the Plague Surgeon, Tallyman, and Malignant Plaguecaster will all attack the Bloodletters. So starting with the Plague Champion and his Power Fist, 2 attacks, hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits, wounding on 3s, and getting 1 wound. 1 5 up invulnerable save, which fails, and the Power Fist does d3 damage, and it will do 3 damage. And so this Demon Prince of Khorne will drop from 8 starting wounds down to 5. And now for the Plague Marine with the Flail of Corruption, has 1 attack base, but the Flail of Corruption will do d3 attacks, will do 2 attacks. Hitting on 3s, re-rolling thanks to the Tallyman being nearby, getting 1 re-roll, and here's the re-roll, and getting 2 hits. Thanks to Putrescent Vitality, it is Strength 7 versus Toughness 6, so 3s to wound, and getting 2 wounds. 2 5 up invulnerable saves, and fails both. And wounds from the Flail of Corruption are 2 damage apiece, so the Demon Prince of Khorne will go from 5 wounds down to 1 left. Now the Malignant Plaguecaster will put his attacks onto the Bloodletters, 3 attacks base, hitting on 3s, re-rolling thanks to the Tallyman, getting 2 re-rolls, and getting 2 hits. Strength 6 versus Toughness 3 means 2s to wound, and getting 2 wounds. 2 5 up invulnerable saves, and fail both. And so 2 Bloodletters will go down. Now the Tallyman will attack, 3 attacks base, hitting on 3s, re-rolling thanks to himself, and 2 re-rolls, getting 3 hits. Strength 4 against Toughness 3 is 3s to wound, and getting 2 wounds. 2 5 up invulnerable saves, and they fail both. And so 2 more Bloodletters will go down, leaving only 1 normal Bloodletter and the Blood Reaper. And so now the Plague Surgeon will attack with his Bale Sword. 3 attacks base, hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits. Wounding on 3s, re-rolling 1s, thanks to being a Plague Weapon, and 1 re-roll, getting 3 wounds. 3 5 up saves from the invulnerable saves, and they pass 1 but fail 2. And so the final 2 Bloodletters will go down. So now at the end of the fight phase, Chaos Demons of Khorne are going to use their final 3 remaining command points in order to use the stratagem Frenetic Bloodlust. Use the stratagem at the end of any fight phase, select one of your Khorne Demon units. That unit can immediately fight again. And so the Chaos Demons of Khorne will select this Bloodthirster to fight again against the Plague Burst Crawler in order to kill it, and then be able to secure Objective 2. So the Bloodthirster, since it did charge this turn, will have 5 attacks on the charge, hitting on 3s, getting 2 hits. Strength 16 on the charge versus Toughness 8 means 2s to wound, and getting 2 wounds. So 2 5 up invulnerable saves, and he passes both! Okay. So that extra attack did nothing. And so now that the fight phase is over, after that crazy ending to the fight phase, we have to go into the morale phase. This squad of Bloodletters lost 1 model, but they have a leadership of 7, and so it's impossible to fail. However, the Plague Marines did lose 5 models this turn, and so they will have to take a morale check. And the Plague Champion has a leadership of 8. and they passed with the 2. So those 2 Plague Marines, the 1 Plague Marine with Flail of Corruption and the Plague Champion, will remain locked in combat. And so now at the end of Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 2, they did not secure Objective 2, they did not finish defending Objective 1, and they did not complete Overwhelming Firepower. So the Chaos Demons of Khorne will throw away Defend Objective 1 since it is currently being held by a squad of Death Guard Nurgling. And so at the end of Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 2, which is also the end of game turn 2, thanks to Mortarion killing off Skarbrand, the Death Guard are currently leading 5 victory points to 1 victory point. Going into Death Guard turn 3, a reminder that both the Death Guard and the Chaos Demons of Khorne have 0 command points left. Taking a look at the tactical objective cards, a reminder that the Death Guard held onto Kingslayer from the last turn, which they will obtain the victory points for at the end of this turn thanks to killing Skarbrand in the previous Chaos Demons of Khorne turn. But this means that they need to draw 2 new tactical objective cards, and they drew no prisoners. Score 1 victory point if an enemy unit was destroyed during your turn. If between 3 and 5 enemy units were destroyed during your turn, score D3 points instead. If 6 or more enemy units were destroyed during your turn, score D3 plus 3 victory points instead. And Spread Contagion. When this tactical objective is generated, nominate one of your Death Guard characters, score 1 victory point if this character is still alive at the end of the game. And the Death Guard are going to nominate the Plague Surgeon. So going into the movement phase, for Death Guard turn 3, this Land Raider is going to move 10 inches up the board towards those Flesh Hounds. And the Land Raider will finish its movement right here. This squad of 3 Nurgling Swarms will remain still. This squad of 3 Nurgling Swarms will remain still. This Plague Burst Crawler is going to fall back 6 inches away from the Bloodthirster, and it will finish its movement here. Mortarion will remain locked in combat with the Bloodletters. These Plague Marines will remain locked in combat with the Demon Prince. This Malignant Plaguecaster is going to move around and through 5 inches into that doorway. And with where the Malignant Plaguecaster is now positioned, he cannot see the Demon Prince of Khorne, which means that these Bloodletters are now the closest visible enemy unit to the Malignant Plaguecaster, who is inside this doorway just on the other side of this wall, for the purposes of Smite. This Tallyman is going to move a few inches this direction, and the Tallyman will finish its movement here, so that now the Tallyman is closer than the Plague Surgeon, so that the Skull Cannons cannot shoot the Plague Surgeon first. And the Plague Surgeon will remain still. Going into the Psychic phase, we will start with this Malignant Plaguecaster, who will cast a Smite into those Bloodletters, and he will cast Putrescent Vitality into the Plague Marines, because he can still see this back Plague Marine. And so starting with Smite from the Malignant Plaguecaster, needing a 5 and gets it with an 8. The Flesh Hounds will attempt to deny the Witch, and they fail to do so. It will cause D3 mortal wounds, and will cause 1 mortal wound. And so the 1 final regular Bloodletter will go down. And now the Malignant Plaguecaster will cast Putrescent Vitality onto the Plague Marines, which doesn't actually need line of sight anyways. And it needed a 6, and he got a 6, so it goes off. And so now Mortarion will cast Blades of Putrefaction and Miasma of Pestilence onto himself. Starting with Miasma of Pestilence, which needs a 6, and he gets it with a 6. And now Blades of Putrefaction needing a 5 and getting it with an 8. And so now going into the shooting phase for Death Guard turn 3, starting with the Plague Burst Crawler, which will not be able to fire this turn since it fell back. Mortarion is going to shoot the Lantern into the final Blood Reaper, hitting on a 2, and it hits. Wounding on a 2, and it wounds. The Blood Reaper has a 5-up invulnerable save, which it fails. And so this Blood Reaper is killed off. And this is significant because it means Mortarion is no longer engaged and therefore will be able to charge in the ensuing assault phase. Now the Malignant Plaguecaster will fire a bolt pistol into those Flesh Hounds, which are within 12 inches, hitting on a 3 and failing to hit. Now the Plague Champion will fire his bolt pistol into the Demon Prince of Khorne, hitting on a 3 and failing to hit. This Land Raider is going to fire its Combi Bolter into those Flesh Hounds, and it will fire its Twin Heavy Bolter and its 2 Twin Las Cannons into that Bloodthirster, which it can see. Starting with the Combi Bolter in rapid fire range, hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits and re-rolling 1s thanks to the Land Raider being within 7 inches of Mortarion. And so the re-roll, still failing to hit. The Fleshhounds are within 7 inches of Mortarion, so they must subtract 1 from their toughness. So wounding on 3s. Not that it mattered, getting 1 wound. 1 5-up invulnerable save, and fails. And so 1 Fleshhound will go down to 1 wound. So now the 2 twin last cannons onto the Bloodthirster. 4 shots hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s, getting 3 hits. And the 1 re-roll, getting 4 hits. Wounding on 3s, getting 2 wounds. 2 5-up invulnerable saves, and failing both. And 2 d6 damage, and only doing 2 wounds. So this Bloodthirster will go from 6 wounds down to 4. Now the 6 shots from the twin heavy bolter, hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s, getting 4 hits so far, and the 1 re-roll, getting 5 hits. Wounding on 5s, getting 4 wounds. 4 4-up armor saves, and it loses 3. And so this Bloodthirster will go from 4 wounds down to 1. So going into the Death Guard assault phase, we have 2 charges to declare. The first is Mortarion declaring a charge onto the Fleshhounds, and the second is the Chaos Land Raider declaring a charge onto the Fleshhound. First, we will roll for Mortarion. He is just over 5 inches away, which means since he's charging through a crater, he needs a 7-inch charge. And so here's the charge roll, getting it with a 7. And so Mortarion will now be locked in combat with those Fleshhounds. The Chaos Land Raider needs a 4-inch charge, and it gets it with a 5. And the Land Raider is now in combat with the Fleshhounds. So at the beginning of the fight phase, we first need to do Mortarion's Host of Plagues. And now that he's down to 1 wound, it only activates on a 6, and it does not go off. And so Mortarion, since he's down to 1 wound, only has 4 attacks base, but he will use the Reaping Scythe version of Silence, so he gets to make 3 hit rolls per base attack for a total of 12 attacks. Hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, and getting 10 hits so far. And the 2 re-rolls, getting 11 hits total. Strength 8 versus Toughness 3 means wounding on 2s, re-rolling 1s, with 6s causing additional mortal wounds. And 1 re-roll so far, and here's the re-roll, getting an additional mortal wound. So getting 11 wounds plus 2 mortal wounds. And so the mortal wounds will take off the 1 wounded Fleshhound and place 1 wound onto 1 other Fleshhound. So now 11 5-up invulnerable saves, and they fail all 11, which means that the 1 wounded Fleshhound will go down along with 5 fully healthy Fleshhounds. And so after removing the Fleshhounds that need to be removed, there is 1 left, which is in combat with both the Land Raider and Mortarion. And I just realized now that I forgot Mortarion's Attendant's Claws and Teeth, so let's do that next. D6 attacks, hitting 6 attacks of course, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s with 1 re-roll, getting all hits. Strength 2 versus Toughness 3 means 5s to wound, 6s cause automatic mortal wounds, and re-rolling failed wound rolls, and getting an additional mortal wound, which means that Fleshhound is automatically dead. And so this final Fleshhound is killed off. And so now the units that didn't charge will go, starting with the Plague Marines since it is the Death Guard turn. And they will pile in. And we will start with the Plague Champion and his Power Fist. 2 attacks, hitting on 4s, re-rolling 1s and 2s of course, so getting only 1 hit. Strength 10, thanks to Putrescent Vitality versus Toughness 6, means 3s to wound. And it wounds, and a 5-up invulnerable save, which fails. And so the Demon Prince of Khorne with wings is killed. And these Plague Marines will consolidate a couple of inches to be closer to that Skull Cannon. And so that will be the end of the fight phase, and there are no morale tests to take as those Fleshhounds were completely wiped out. Also, before I forget, Mortarion's going to consolidate a couple of inches. Just like that. So taking a look at the tactical objective cards for the Death Guard, they do have Kingslayer, thanks to the previous Khorne turn, so they get D3 victory points for that. And here's the roll for victory points, getting 2. And so far, Spread Contagion, while it's not been complete, is still active since the Plague Surgeon is still alive. And for no prisoners, they did destroy 3 enemy units. They finished off the Bloodletters, they killed off the Fleshhounds, and they killed off the Demon Prince of Khorne. And so that is also worth D3 victory points, getting them another 2. And so at the end of Death Guard turn 3, the score currently sits at 9 victory points for the Death Guard and 1 victory point for the Chaos Demons of Khorne. Going into Chaos Demons of Khorne, turn 3, Khorne is still holding on to Secure Objective 2 and Overwhelming Firepower from the previous turn, but this means that they needed to draw 1 new tactical objective card, and they drew Kingslayer. Score D3 victory points if your opponent's Warlord has been destroyed during this or any previous turn. So going into the movement phase, we will start with this Bloodthirster, who now only has a 6-inch movement, moving 6 inches up the board to be just over an inch away from the Plagueburst Crawler and to definitely be holding on to Secure Objective 2. And so the Bloodthirster will end its movement right here. This Skull Cannon will remain still. This Skull Cannon will remain still. And finally, this Skull Cannon will remain still. Going into the shooting phase for Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 3, we will start with this Skull Cannon, which will shoot at Mortarion. Skull Cannon has D6 shots, getting 1 shot. Thanks to Miasma of Pestilence hitting on a 4, and it hits. Wounding on a 3, and it fails to wound. So now this Skull Cannon is going to shoot at Mortarion. D6 shots, getting 3 shots. Hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits. Wounding on 3s, getting 2 wounds. 2 4-up invulnerable saves, and passes both. Finally, this Skull Cannon is going to shoot Mortarion. D6 shots, getting 2 shots. Hitting on 4s, fails to hit. And so after that horrible, horrible shooting phase from the Chaos Demons of Khorne, the Chaos Demons of Khorne are going to concede the game. And so with that concession, the game is over, which means since the Plague Surgeon is still alive, the Death Guard get 1 more victory point, going up to a total of 10. So the Death Guard have 10 victory points, and the Chaos Demons of Khorne have 1 victory point. And so now that the game is over, with a concession from the Chaos Demons of Khorne, I can go over some of my final thoughts, first and foremost of which is explaining why all of a sudden Khorne decided to concede, even though they have 3 Skull Cannons and the Bloodthirster left. And the reason is quite simple. By failing to kill Mortarion with those Skull Cannons, it meant that this turn they would have failed to achieve Overwhelming Firepower and would have failed to achieve Kingslayer, which means not only would they not have gotten the victory points from that this turn, but they also would then have had to decide whether or not to throw them away in order to be able to draw new ones, or hold on to them in hope that they could achieve them later. The other problem, of course, and the biggest one of all, after what we've seen this game and just how amazing he was in all aspects of the game, other than shooting his lantern, which he barely did anything with, other than killing, I think, a single Blood Reaper. Could be wrong on that. But Mortarion is still alive after all of this. And while he's down to only 8 inches of movement, since he's down to 1 wound, he could still move up the board towards this Skull Cannon, 8 inches, most likely make it in with the charge, and wipe this Skull Cannon out, which means that this Land Raider could turn and focus all of its shooting on this Skull Cannon, which would have a good chance of doing heavy damage and possibly wiping that out. And of course, these guys right here would be free to move up the board towards this Skull Cannon and engage it later. The other issue is that Khorne, of course, has a 3rd tactical objective card, Secure Objective 2, which they are holding right here, and would get 1 victory point for. However, there is a problem with this, because this Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage only has 1 remaining wound. And so Khorne would have had 2 choices going into the assault phase this turn. 1, have it charge into the Plagueburst Crawler and possibly have it die from Overwatch. There is a very good chance it would lose at least 1 more this turn, which would kill it, therefore not getting Secure Objective 2, and then that Bloodthirster is just dead. The second option, which is just as bad, is that the Bloodthirster could remain still and not charge the Plagueburst Crawler, guaranteeing that they secure Objective 2, but that means the Plagueburst Crawler is not locked in combat and can just fire on it the next turn with everything it's got. And so either way, this Bloodthirster is most likely dead. in Death Guard, either at the end of Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 3 or during Death Guard turn 4. Either way, there's a very high probability that this Bloodthirster would be killed off. Considering the fact that the Death Guard would be able to draw 2 new tactical objective cards, because of that shooting phase, at most, Khorne was only going to get 1 more point. And so going into turn 4, Death Guard would be leading 9-2, drawing 2 new ones, potentially getting more points. And so at this point, it looked like it was just going to be a Death Guard runaway victory, since they failed to kill Mortarion. Had the Skull Cannons killed Mortarion, there was the potential for a lot of victory points for Khorne. But since they failed to do so this turn, the likelihood that Khorne would be able to make up the ground in later turns was very unlikely. Like I mentioned, Mortarion would be able to move up and most likely engage this Skull Cannon, Land Raider, shoot and possibly destroy this Skull Cannon, the Plague Marines and characters moving up and engaging, possibly destroying this Skull Cannon. Khorne was very close to being tabled since they didn't take out Mortarion. The hope was that, which is why I started with this Skull Cannon first, the hope was that this Skull Cannon would finish off the 1 wound on Mortarion, which would mean that this Skull Cannon could shoot and possibly finish off the Plague Burst Crawler, so that then the Bloodthirster doesn't even have to worry about trying to engage it. And then this far Skull Cannon would shoot and hopefully finish off the Plague Marines, which would mean they would get 3 kills in the shooting phase for D3 victory points from overwhelming firepower. And so obviously if they completed all of that, and if they rolled well, they would get potentially 3 victory points for Kingslayer, 3 victory points for overwhelming firepower, 1 victory point for secure objective 2, and 1 victory point for Slay the Warlord, which would give them 8 additional victory points, and would tie the game up at 9 victory points apiece. But since they failed to kill Mortarion, all of the hopes of doing that went completely down the drain. And considering the fact that that Land Raider is still at full wounds, obviously that's going to cause problems for Khorne later. Even if Mortarion had died, that Land Raider would still be a massive problem. I think because of the windows in this building right here, that Land Raider would still be able to see this Bloodthirster. So even if the Bloodthirster charged and killed the Plague Burst Crawler, that Bloodthirster was most likely dead next turn, which would take away all of the close combat firepower that Khorne had, short of the Hellblades on the Skull Cannons. And so it just looked grim for Khorne at this point, which is why I felt it was prudent for Khorne to concede the game. So I do apologize for the sudden concession. Obviously, I would prefer to see a game through all the way to its conclusion. If it's close enough to get that far, it's usually more fun to play. There were a lot of frustrating dice rolls in this game on both sides, but especially on Khorne's, especially with that last shooting phase. If Mortarion survives, the Death Guard have a very good chance of winning, especially if he is very low on wounds, because that meant a lot of firepower was focused on him, but wasn't able to finish him off, and that firepower could have been focused elsewhere. Hopefully, it was still enjoyable to watch. I hope you liked the video. Please comment down below about things you would have done differently, or whether or not you thought Khorne still would have had a chance had the game continued. And stay tuned for the next one.